So we're going to hit that button. We're going to get that going. We're going to make sure we're streaming live on Facebook as well. All right. Hey, everybody, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are back on the Zoom here for another event. We haven't been on the Zoom for a while, so I kind of got a little rusty. We did about 200 of these over like 2020 and 2021. And, one of the coolest things about it was we were able to pair up duos that we may or may not otherwise have had the opportunity to do so. And tonight is no exception. Very excited about that. If you are in our area and you are lucky enough tomorrow to have a ticket, we're actually going to be doing an event tomorrow with Ralph Macchio in person. And he's going to be interviewed by S.E. Hinton, the author of The Outsiders. And that's going to be at the high school where S.E. Hinton went to school and wrote The Outsiders from. So that's going to be quite a special thing tomorrow night. So if you're around, come check that out. We might have a couple of tickets left for that. And then next week we have George Saunders in conversation with Sterling Harjo, the creator of Reservation Dogs. And that's going to be in person live here in Tulsa as well. So a lot of cool stuff coming up. So you can go to our website, magiccitybooks.com, and see the full schedule there as well. Tonight, so excited about this. I had a chance to cram this book, The Come Up, over the last couple of days. And I just was telling Jonathan that, I love the oral history format. And if you've read his previous work on, The Wire, or the writing he's done on basketball, that whatever topic he tackled is going to be quite a fun journey, and seeing him turn his eye to the world of hip hop. And of course, this kind of origin story, it's a superhero origin story of these amazing people that created this world that we live in now. I was here a few weeks ago, just down the street. We had a concert here, and the Sugar Hill Gang was playing at an outside park, and Melly Mel was out there, and you could really see the audience just going crazy. And of course, these are like boomers and like people in their 50s and 60s mixed with kids today, and you can see the kind of through line that this music has had. And something that when I was a kid felt like it still hadn't been legitimized, now feels like part of the American fabric. And I think we're finally starting to see it for what it truly is. So having a book like The Come Up come into our lives is quite special, and we're so happy to have John with us tonight. But more importantly, you won't have to hear me much longer, because we have a special guest moderator with us tonight, and that is Mr. Shea Serrano. If you don't know Shea's work, he's done a zillion things, but has really kind of taken these topics, of course, rap, of course, basketball, and most recently a book on movies. And he's almost got his own little, it's like, how Stephen King would have his own shelf when you were a kid. You'd go to the store and it'd be like, they all had kind of a certain look and feel. It's like Shea Serrano is slowly building the Shea Serrano shelf. You're going to have this kind of look and feel to all the different topics he's taking on. So Shea and Jonathan are going to talk tonight. I hope you guys put in your questions into the Q&A, and we'll tackle those in about 30 minutes. So please put those in there, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And most importantly, you need to get a copy of The Come Up, and you can do that quite easily by looking at the chat here. We're going to keep dropping the link in there. And, Magic City Books is a nonprofit bookstore, so you're going to support the work that we do, and you're also going to put a little change in Jonathan's pocket. So that's two good things you can do tonight. So without any further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Shea Serrano and our very special guest, Jonathan Abrams.
All right, Jonathan Abrams. I'm so excited to talk to you. It's been a long time, it feels like.
It's been way too long, Shea. How you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm good. Where are you now? Where do you live? Do you still live in friggin' Carolina or whatever?
Yeah.
Is that the official name? Carol, that's what it says on the sign? Carolina or whatever?
Live from Charlotte, Carolina, the hotbed of the South.
I don't know if you remember the first time we met. I remember it because I was like, oh, fuck, that's Jonathan Abrams. It was, we had been at like in LA for Grantland. They would do like a basketball thing every so often. And that was like the beginning of it. But really the first time I got to sit down and talk to you was we had gone out to summer camp, like NBA Summer League.
In Vegas,
and, yeah. And I think you were out there. If I remember correctly, you were out there because you were writing about Karl Anthony Towns. It was his first year in the league. Am I remembering this correctly? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you had gone out there. Grantland had sent a bunch of people because everybody knew it was about to shut down, and they were just like spending all the money. They sent us all out there. And I was in the airport I was at the airport afterwards, and I was just like tweeting, waiting for my plane, and then I got a text from you, and it just said, "Come to the bar," and I was like, "Who is this?" And I went walking over to the bar, and you were sitting there, just looking fucking as cool as possible. And then we sat there and talked for like 40 minutes. I almost missed my airplane just because I was sitting there talking to you. I don't know if you remember that at all, but I remember that.
Yeah, of course.
I remember that.
And it's funny because it's like, you know, meeting Shea Serrano before he becomes the Shea Serrano, and thinking about Grantland. That was such a fun, pivotal time in my life where you were just challenged working with so many amazing writers, so many people, and just I wouldn't exchange that period for anything in my life. Grantland was such a special time.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was very intimidating to sit in the room at the table, and it was like, you're there, Zach Lowe is there, Jason's there, Mallory's there, Molly Lambert, Bill. Like it was just like fucking everywhere you looked, there was somebody more talented than you. It was crazy. But I had been following your work prior to that moment, and then that was when we like Summer League is when we exchanged numbers, and then we had just been texting ever since then. And I have just been watching your book career do this, Boys Among Men. When that one came out, I remember that was like a whole big thing. And then you did the Wire book, which everybody went fucking crazy for. And I remember I don't know if people know how long you have been working on this one, because it's been years and years and years. I still remember when you texted me the first time and you're like, hey, I want to do this book, basically what the come up was. And I was like, fucking good luck, dude, because that sounds like a monster. And then you did it. And then you really, really did it. That's just crazy, man.
So that was a question that I had for you, Shea, because you were one of the first people, and this was fresh off of the Rap Yearbook, right? That came out, and that was an amazing book. And I told you this idea. You're one of the first people. So what was your genuine, honest reaction? I said, hey, Shea, I'm thinking about trying to do an oral history on the rise of hip hop.
I honestly was like, fuck that, is how I felt. Because by that point I did the Rap Yearbook, which that was 2015. But for that one, the only person that I talked to for it, like in an interview type setting, was Ice-T, because he was doing the foreword. So it was like we got on the phone for an hour and chit-chatted about whatever. And so we did that, but that was the only one. And prior to that, I had done the rap coloring book. And with the rap coloring book, I did that one with Bun B. And he was very much like, there are two ways to do the book. We can just do it without talking to any of the rappers, which had happened before. You go to like an Urban Outfitters or whatever, and you'll see a Keanu Reeves coloring book that he did not approve. They just made it, right? So there's that version. Or the other version, which Bun was adamant on, he was like, hey, we have to do it where we have the permission of every person whose face appears in this book. We need to make sure that they're cool with it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like the right way to do it. Let's do that. And so drawing all the actual pictures and making all the stuff, that I did that over spring break. I was still teaching at the time. That only took a week, but getting in contact with all the rappers and getting everybody's lawyer to like sign the permission to use their likeness, like that took like 6 or 7 months, and it was only 35 or 40 people that I had to chase down. And that's what I had in my head when you said you were going to do this book, because I didn't even talk to them. I just had to get in contact with their lawyer or whoever handled their affairs. And so when you said you were going to do this, and I knew you were doing the oral history version, and I knew how many interviews I was going to be. I had a general idea anyway. And I was just like, it just seemed like such a gargantuan task, like an impossibility. You know what I mean? That's what I thought. I was like, he's fucked. He's so fucked.
So I think I appreciated how big of a ordeal this was going to be heading in, but still that didn't really match up to it, because I was coming off of the Wire book, and I did the oral history on that show, and that's a really insular world, right? You have David Simon. I was able to get David Simon's go ahead to do that book. And then Alexa Fogel, who was a casting director, basically put me in touch with all the people I needed to get in touch with. And you're answering Alexa's call because Alexa can get you a job in your next show. So they were quick to respond to her. For this book, I probably read about 30 hip hop books hitting into it. And there have been a couple really, really good hip hop books or history of hip hop books. Dan Charnas has The Big Payback. Jeff Ching has Can't Stop, Won't Stop. There's been a couple really, really good ones. But I wanted to go oral history route because I feel like there's pioneers and innovators in this genre who don't get the respect, or not even the respect. They're not as well known as they should be. And I really wanted their voices to be heard and undiluted in a text. So the first thing I did was I made this big old list of probably close to 1,000 names. And when I started this journey, I just told myself, look, I'm going to talk to anybody and anybody who has had any type of impact on hip hop. And if they'll talk to me, I'm going to do this interview and go from there and see what I can get. And I knew hitting in that there would be like some big, like, I'm not going to get 5 hours to pick Jay-Z's brain, right? Like, I knew that going in, but I also knew that there were people who had impacts and, you know, cross milestones in this genre to lead it from where it was birthed in the Bronx in the 1970s and this desolation and decay with these kids just inventing this genre that would go on to permeate all strands of America and the world. I knew I'd be able to get to some of them, and that thought carried me through. So when I was able to talk to somebody like DMC or Curtis Blow or Killer Mike or Bun B, I mean, I can go on and on, you know, that propelled me and lifted me for days. And I knew that, you know, I was on my way to put together the book that I wanted to put together.
Yeah, dude, I was so excited when I finally got the copy in my hands. I was so excited to read it, to see who ended up going in there. Because every once in a while, as you were working through the book, you would send me a text or be like, hey, I talked to this person or that person. I was like, dude, this book is going to be so fucking good. Because I think what ends up happening is, because those bigger names have like Jay-Z has a book and he has a ton of interviews, and you're not going to sit down with him and get something that you wouldn't have gotten from somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like so I think attacking it the other way and being like, well, let me build the house from outside in. You know what I mean? It makes it feel special is what it feels like when you're reading through it and you're like, you see a name that you don't recognize and you're like, who is this? What did this person do? And you're like, oh fuck, that was the co-writer of like this. You know what I mean? Like, it's nuts to just see you sort of, I don't know, putting all of the pieces together. And I know for me, just being a professional writer, like I have a real appreciation for the way that you do all of the stuff that you do, because all of your projects are so big. Every single one of them is just like a giant thing. And that's what I struggle with the most whenever I'm writing something. I do really well if it's like a small amount of space that I can really dig into and spend a lot of time with. Anytime it like has to open up any, I just sort of, I feel like there's too much stuff, you know what I mean? And like, so if you look at like a fiction thing that I wrote or whatever, I wrote like a little fiction story. Uh-oh. You there?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh, okay. You're frozen on my end. Yeah, like if I wrote like a fiction story, literally the first one that I wrote was only over a 6-minute span. It was a 6-minute amount of time that I wanted to write about. And like, I'm good at that. But then what you're doing is covering like literal decades, hundreds and hundreds of people. I'm very curious how that looks like from an, this is a super inside baseball question, but what does that look like from like an organizational standpoint? What does your desktop look like? You know what I mean? Like, how do you hold all of this information?
Well, organizationally, I have a bunch of different folders that I'm printing out articles and information. I'm saying, okay, this is the Chronic. This is about Southern rap. This is about mob music in Oakland. And I'm trying to separate it all. You know, when you're looking at hip hop, the way I looked at it is that hip hop is a tree, right? And that tree is planted in New York City, and it starts to blossom and grow in New York City. But after a while, the branches start growing and spreading out all over. Yeah. So the branches growing out in Southern California with, first it was the African Bambaataa, Planet Rock music, and then quickly it develops into the NWA type and the Chronic. So there's one branch over there. There's a branch growing in Houston with the slowed down music that that's coming out of there. Then, the Southern explosion happens where you have places popping up like Atlanta and Memphis and New Orleans. So I try to hit all those. So it was just trying to capture, first the roots, and that's that tree is growing, the book stays in New York, and then it's hitting those different branches that are spreading.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I remember
Shea, I will say one thing quickly, that maybe my organization skills aren't the best, because the original book that I submitted, it was probably about 3 times as big as the final product of the book.
Yeah.
So I think I gave my editor a lot of headaches, because to me, all of it was so important, and hip hop's history is so voluminous that it was hard to extract stuff out.
Yeah, I imagine. So what is I find that what always ends up happening whenever I'm working on a book is I will learn one like offbeat piece of information that will just stick in my head forever. Like after I learn it, I can't, like it's the one thing that I identify with the book. For example, when I did basketball and other things, I learned that if you looked at the average height of NBA basketball players for the entire NBA for like 30 years straight was 6'7". Every year, take all the players in the NBA, average the height, 6'7", for like 30 straight years, right? When I did hip hop and other things, I learned that in LL Cool J's "I'm Bad" video, there's a part where a guy takes his jacket off for him. Do you remember this part of the video? He's like in the warehouse, and he does his arms like this, and the guy pulls his jacket off, and LL Cool J just keeps on going. And I learned that guy who takes the jacket off is the same guy who posed for the silhouette in the Public Enemy, symbol.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So like little things like that, it'll go in there, and I'll be like, that's fucking crazy. Is there something that when you were working on this that you're just gonna have in your head forever?
Yeah, I'll say that I think it's some of the conversations that I had. This has only happened to me like once before. When I was reporting the Wire book, Ed Burns was one of the co-creators of the show, and talking to him was just like talking to somebody who it seemed had like every answer solved, who had debated everything. And if, more people would just listen to this guy, the world would probably be a better place. And that happened when I was talking to Kool Moe Dee for this book. And Kool Moe Dee Kool Moe Dee is one of those guys who his reign really spans generations. He was there at the beginning, then he was there in the golden age, and he was at the first Grammys that had hip hop, and he's still going now. And he had just reflected so much on his life, on hip hop, on his impact on hip hop, on hip hop's impact on America, to where he was just dropping jewels left and right. And it's almost like, man, this isn't an interview anymore. I just feel like this is a education. Even like just him talking about the Grammys. If you remember, I think it was the 1988 Grammys, where they were going to give hip hop its first award since the advent of the Grammys, but groups like Public Enemy and Def Jam and other people, they were all going to boycott the Grammys because they weren't going to air it live on television. And Kool Moe Dee, he was the only nominated rap artist to go, because he said that, hey, we didn't have any type of collaboration or deliberation on this. You guys just made this call unilaterally. And I feel like if we go and say why we're mad, it'll have more of an impact than just boycotting it altogether. So he went in the midst of this boycott, and he was the only hip hop artist there.
Yeah, Kool Moe Dee is so fucking cool. I always think about, whenever I think about him, I think about how he was the guy who essentially invented battle rap when against Busy Bee, when they were, they had a version of battle rap prior to Kool Moe Dee showing up, but it was like the competition was not me versus you, and like we're gonna say shit at each other. It was like, we're gonna go against each other, but we're gonna see who can get the crowd the most hype. That's basically how they battled. And then Busy Bee was up there doing his thing at it was like the Harlem Christmas Fest or whatever it was, and he like is calling out names of people that he gets the crowd more hyped in. And one of the names he called out was Kool Moe Dee. Is how the story goes. And Kool Moe Dee was in the crowd, and he goes up on stage, and rather than going to make the crowd hype, he just started making fun Busy Bee in front of everybody. You can hear it on YouTube. It's one of the craziest like videos that you can listen to. There's no footage of it. You're just hearing it, but you hear Kool Moe Dee going, and he's like, "Hold on, Busy Bee. I don't mean to be bold, but put that ba shit on hold or whatever." And the crowd is like, "What the fuck is happening right now?" And then he just keeps on making fun of him, and you hear poor Busy Bee. Oh my God, what a person to be in the history of hip hop. This great career, and then you become the guy who was like the first battle rap victim. You hear him in the background, stop, like he's just shouting at Kool Moe Dee to stop. Oh my God, Kool Moe Dee is so fucking. I was very happy when I saw his name in the book. I was like, yes,
you know what?
We're gonna do it.
The funny thing about that interview with him too is that so Ann Carly, who was this amazing early pioneering executive at Jive Records, who she helped do the Will Smith, Jazzy Jeff Parents Just Don't Understand video. She helped set that interview up. But when it was time for me to call Kool Moe Dee, he picked up and he answered like real gruff. He's like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh man, this interview is gonna be horrible." And trust me, like I had a couple interviews like that where like I couldn't get nothing. But I don't know if he had just forgotten about the interview or whatnot, or it just slipped his radar. But after like I kind of explained who I was, and he gave like one of the best interviews I've ever had in my life.
He's so dope. I felt that way when I talked to Bun for the first time, who I think is maybe the smartest person in America. Just like he talks in paragraphs. And so I remember when you text me and you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna go talk to Bun." I said, "Oh, this is two super smart dudes just fucking chilling out together for an hour or whatever." It's so good. Who was a terrible interview that you had, Jonathan? We won't tell anybody. You can tell us. You don't have to, but you can't. You should tell it. Offline, you can tell me. Just text me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna put anybody on blast right now.
Oh wow, Kanye. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that was right. Yeah. When you're doing a big project like this is another thing I'm very curious about. How do you know when it's done? You know what I mean? Because this is like a thing you could do 900 pages of this if you wanted to, and cover up until 1984 or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think I had just made a cutoff date. And what's funny is that hip hop runs on its own schedule. And I remember like one person I wanted to get, I sent him a DM on Twitter, and then maybe like 2.5 years later, he answered the DM. he was like, "Hey, you still working on this? I can talk now." I was like, "Man, like I already turned in this manuscript." So I think I just had to give myself a cutoff date at a certain point. And even that said, like I had to ask for an extension with this book when typically like I turn in my work and my manuscripts ahead of time. And this one was just too massive. I needed like another year.
When you were a kid, I feel like everybody has this story of when you fall in love like with a thing, right? Be it basketball or rap or movies or whatever. What was the I love rap moment for young Jonathan Abrams?
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California. I feel like you're taunting me with that Dodgers hat because I'm still mourning the loss of my team from these playoffs. I mean, the Astros are still in it, right? Why aren't you rocking the Astros?
I like the Dodgers colors better. I went to a Dodgers game a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago. I was just in LA, and a buddy of mine is a big baseball fan. I don't know anything about baseball, but we went and we had good seats, and I had some good snacks. I ate some nachos out of a baseball helmet, and I was like, baseball's the best sport now, is how I felt. You know what I mean? But that's why, and I bought a hat while I was there, but I don't care either way.
Fair enough. So yeah, I grew up in Southern California, and you know, my mom was one of those moms where she took one look at a parental advisory sticker and that thing would be going back to Radio Shack or Circuit City or wherever it was. So I think she got one of my Tupac CDs back then, but Tupac was that first artist for me where, you know, he just showed the full range of being Black and what it was like to have that whole experience as a young Black man in America. And I wasn't getting it or seeing it anywhere else. So to hear a person go from songs like Dear Mama or To Live and Die in LA to I Get Around to Hit 'Em Up to a bunch of different stuff, to show that range, show me the full complexity and spirit and dualism. And he was just an amazing figure to me. I know, like, I'll never forget where I was when I heard that he got shot and then he passed away about 5 days later. That's, one of those man on the moon moments I think for people of our age, right?
Yeah, for sure. I remember being in high school. That's how different it was back then. It was like, if it happens now, about it 4 seconds later, like immediately. But there, it was like it happened, and then it's got to get through the news to TV. We didn't have cable at my house, so somebody had to watch it. And then it like starts to spread through the school like 2 weeks later or a week. It like showed up in a magazine. Is how far behind we were. We were like, what?
That's how you found out.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this is crazy. What is your favorite like era of rap? This is my favorite question to ask people.
Like I said, I got to stick with my roots. So I'm going with that, early to mid 90s, the Death Row, G-Funk, the synthesizers, the Chronic and Doggy Style and All Eyes on Me and Ice Cube. And I'm going with the West Coast crew from that era.
That's a great pick.
Even DJ Quick. DJ Quick is criminally underrated. He doesn't get the love he deserves.
DJ Quick is so good. Two things. Number one, G-Funk, I think, is the best like subgenre of rap. It's just perfect. It's just absolutely perfect, right? Number two, everybody always remembers the part in the Source Awards with like Suge Knight doing the Come to Death Row, whatever. Like that whole night was crazy. And what a lot of people forget is that DJ Quick was like the first one who started like talking shit at the awards. The award show opens up with the Death Row Records like compilation performance. They build this like set on stage of jail cells, and every so often a door would open and one of them would come out and perform, and DJ Quick came out with his fucking perm and was just like talking shit to a guy that he had been battling with. He's so cool. He's so incredibly cool. Just the best. Okay, then let me ask you an early 90s West Coast specific question. This is a very common debate that I think says a lot about the type of rap fan that you are. The Chronic or Doggy Style? Which of these is a better album? Not more important. The Chronic is clearly the more important album, but which of them is just a full-on better, this is what G-Funk is album?
I'm gonna stick with the Chronic.
Oh my God. All right. Explain yourself, Jonathan Abrams.
I appreciate Snoop Dogg and his longevity, and I like him, but people who list him on their top 5, I can't really comprehend or understand it. And I'm saying it as a fan, but you go back to the Chronic and you have classic after classic, and it's that, and Snoop is, featured heavily on the Chronic.
Yeah, because he's better than Dr. Dre. That's why he got the ball.
Dr. Dre had 27 other people on the Chronic. It was barely Dr. Dre.
That's true. God, those 2 albums are so good. Just so good. Even now, the twins, my 3 sons, the twins are 15 now, and they started doing one of them started getting into music. The other one went to basketball. One of them went to music, and I was like, yeah, I got them both covered. And the one who went to music, we would do this thing where we would go to the record store, and I try not to push my stuff on him. Just let him walk in there. I never forget, we were in the record store and he's looking through and he's like, Daddy, you ever heard of the Roots? And I was like, what? I've never, tell me about the Roots, son. Tell me everything about the Roots. You know what I mean? But he was going through there and he got the Doggy Style album. And I was like, oh, please pick that one. Please pick that one. And he bought it. And I was so happy. And then we got home and I can hear through the walls in the room, he puts it on a little record player and it's just going. And I fucking hear Corrupt just corrupting my poor boy. Just, if Corrupt gave a fuck about a bitch, I'd always be broke. And just through the walls. And I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
How much did growing up with DJ Screw in that era, how prevalent was that in Houston for you growing up?
Yeah, it was really, he was like a legendary figure in Houston. I was in San Antonio, so we're 3 hours away, 3.5 hours away. So his influence doesn't get to San Antonio until he had already passed away, right? But so 1999, I leave San Antonio, I go to Sam Houston, which is an hour north of Houston, and this is when I'm starting to learn about all of the like Houston rappers, DJ Screw especially. I took a history of rock and roll class, and they talked about DJ Screw, and there's the first time I'd heard of him, and they played his music. I'm like, this is crazy. This is so dope, so interesting. But then you start learning about, like, you go to Houston and you see like the murals that are painted, and you see screwed up tapes and records, and you talk to like Bun or Slim or any of the guys, and they're like, this guy was like LeBron James mixed with Jesus, just in the city, just like doing his own thing. He did beyond just making this type of music that nobody had ever made before. He like essentially created this business model of like the sort of sell it out of your trunk type mantra that Houston became known for, because they couldn't get record deals from East Coast or West Coast labels. They're like, fuck it, we'll do it on our own. He like was doing that. People were lined up at this man's house every night, blocks and blocks of people in line, just coming to his door, handing money through the gate, taking it. Like, it's almost impossible to overstate how big of a figure he was and still remains today. It's nuts, dude. Did you, when you were reading through your books for research, did you read Lance Scott Walker's DJ Screw book? It might have came out after you had finished.
Yeah, that came out after I had finished.
Okay, that's right. It's really good. It's really good. He has a great line at the start of it that says, it just starts with, "This is folklore." And I'm like, let's fucking go. That's perfect. We should do some questions. We have some questions. Here's Jeff.
Okay, so first question, this is for both of you, and it says, it's from Thomas, who says, both of you have done hip hop books, studied the history, and lived a lot of it. How do you all feel about the current state of hip hop and rap? The landscape has changed. Either one of you could jump in there first.
I'll jump in on this. I know that there's not a lot of stuff that I'm gonna listen to that's new and current right now, but something that I can appreciate about hip hop is that it's always going to be propelled by the younger generation. That's always going to be making new iterations and making new subgenres and consuming it the most. So am I going to listen to somebody like Lil Uzi Vert as much as I used to listen to Tupac or Nas or Biggie? Probably not, but I can also appreciate that, you know, these are the legends who are being built that kids are going to celebrate 20, 30 years down the road. And that's one reason why I think hip hop is going to be eternal and always stay at the forefront, because it's always being almost molded over and renewed and bringing up something different almost, you know, every year.
Yeah. I think that I find the most interesting is how different the consumption of it is now. Like when Jonathan and I were teenagers, it was like, you were listening to whatever Sway said was like the important artist. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it was. Everybody was listening to the same 6 people or whatever. DMX would show up and Sway's like, this is the guy. And we'd go like, all right, that's the guy now. We're going to learn all of his shit. And we were all listening to the same things. And now the internet has just like atomized everything. You can be a giant star in a very small piece of the internet, making $4 million a year, and nobody else has ever heard of you ever. I went into Caleb's room. This is the one who's super into music. And I walked in, and on his TV, he's got Spotify up. And it was like his 5 artists that he was listening through. And I didn't know one single person on there. Like, not one single person. And I write about rap for a living, and I didn't know who these people were. It was like 14, 15-year-old kids that he just knew about from other 14 and 15-year-old kids. It's so interesting to watch them consume it. It's also a little sad because it's not as communal of an experience. It's like you put your headphones in and you take it in here and that's it, versus like probably Jonathan and I have the same experience of like riding to school on the bus, and you're holding a CD player, trying to hold it flat so it doesn't skip, and you and your buddy both have an ear to the headphones, and you're like, yeah, this is the best shit I ever heard. And even though you're only hearing half of it, You know what I mean? It's to me, it's so interesting. Like Jonathan was saying, just keeps evolving. It's gonna just always be there in some sort of interesting way, I think.
Yo, Shea, what you know about trying to run and get your exercise in while you're listening to music and you have the CD player, trying to make sure that it doesn't skip?
Dude, the best like shock system ever is you hold that bitch perfectly still and you're going.
They don't know the struggle, kids today.
The Discman flashbacks.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Arizona for Jonathan that says, congratulations on the book. Was there anyone you interviewed that surprised you?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I think I was continually surprised over and over again. And I know that sounds like I'm evading the question, but trust me, I'm not. When the books that I try to do, I try to pick subjects that I'm passionate about, because writing books is such an isolating process and you work on it for years and years and years. So you want to have that passion to pick you up during the times when you don't think that this book is ever going to come together, because that's going to be a moment you hit in any book. So with every interview I did, I feel like I took something new, you know, whether it was DMC talking about the roots of disco and hip hop. I was really happy that I talked to somebody like Edwin Fletcher, Duke Booty, who he co-wrote The Message. He wrote most of The Message and did a lot of the music for it before he passed away last year. I was really happy to talk to him. I mentioned Kool Moe Dee earlier. Ann Carly and Monica Lynch were two leading female executives in this whole genre. I mean, I grew up on Ice Cube, so talking to him was a treat. Shea mentioned how smart and just amazing Bun B is. So talking to him and hearing his process and how he puts together lyrics was amazing to me. So just time and time again during the process of this book, I was really blown away and really, really happy and fortunate to be able to get what I got for it.
So we're going to we'll give people a second to ask some more questions. I'll fill in a couple. I've got a couple of questions, Jonathan, for you, which is, you know, when you look at someone like Jan Winter, right, the founder of Rolling Stone, just put a big biography out, and he also was the founder of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I know there's like a Trap Hall of Fame or museum in Atlanta, but do you think that enough people, kind of the big moguls of the hip hop world, the Jay-Z's or whoever else, are putting the infrastructure in place that we might need to kind of keep the history and legacy of hip hop alive, you know, those kind of things like the Hall of Fames and whatever we would need to kind of keep people aware of the pioneers of this industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jeff. And there's been movements over the last few years to get a real hip hop Hall of Fame and museum going. I think once we got to the end of this book, part of the conclusion that I was trying to make was that when Kendrick Lamar got his Pulitzer, it was such an amazing moment for hip hop. And it was one that nobody foresaw coming for this musical genre. And while this moment was amazing and really needed to be celebrated, Public Enemy could have won just as easily 30 years later if hip hop was viewed from that same prism. So that's why I think hip hop needs to be documented and celebrated. And it's, you know, one reason why I wanted to do this book was to be able to have some of these things down, because we're about to celebrate the 50-year anniversary for hip hop. And it's still a young genre where you can still talk to some of the pioneers and this stuff can be documented. So yes, I feel like much should be done and much more inroads should be made as far as preserving this culture, because it's still there to be preserved from the people who originated it.
Hey, Shea, I'm curious to hear what you think about the idea of if hip hop feels like it's too safe in a certain way. I was thinking, you know, when I was a kid and I was like 11 or 12 and I would get like the new Easy EP or something, I'd have to hide that from my grandmother or from my mom, or, you know, it'd be, you know, the parental warning, you know, there'd be content that was not necessarily something like my teacher. I remember a teacher taking away a tape of mine in class one time and something like that. But I wonder, you know, as society has changed and we seem a little bit more less concerned with some of that content, does that take the danger fact away or kind of the edginess away from artists now that was part of people's persona and their idea of who they were? I was thinking like Madonna, for example. When I was a kid, Madonna seemed controversial, right? There's no one that seems controversial today. And I'm just curious, if you think that has a negative impact in any way.
No, I don't think it has a negative impact anyway, because it's a thing that you can't avoid. You know what I mean? Just because everything now is so much different than it was before. You have access to everything all of the time, all at once. I was just yesterday talking to my wife Laramie about the video game Mortal Kombat. And when it came out in 1993, there was like news stories about how this video game was going to ruin children forever because it was the first one that just showed like full-on murder. And like, it was like a whole thing. And all they were doing was like a digital version of reach in a chest and hold like a red circle that was supposed to be a heart. Versus now, on the same, they have like a Mortal Kombat now, and there's a fatality in there where a guy is like on his hands and his knees, and another guy hits him in the head with a sledgehammer, and the guy's head comes out of his own butt. Like that happens, and you're just like, whatever about it. You know what I mean? I don't think that it's bad that we don't have like controversial figures in the way that we used to. I think it's okay because people become interesting in other ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Got a question here from Joe, and Joe says, Jonathan, you mentioned the original manuscript was 3 times longer than the final book. What was something that got cut that you wish you could have included?
I think there were different scenes along the road of hip hop that got cut. There was stuff about some of the first tours that artists had went on that got cut. There was a lot of deeper stuff. I can't really, thinking about it now, I can't really argue with it because it was a lot of trims, and it made the book more readable. I need to go through it and look for more specific stuff, but some personal anecdotes. I know I had what I thought was a pretty interesting interview with Hurricane Chris, the A-Bebe singer.
A-Bebe.
Yeah.
A-Bebe.
that didn't make it in because, so in the end, the book kind of touches on, it goes through different subgenres, and it also goes through different geographies and different cities that I felt were important to hit on. So it touches on like Memphis and New Orleans and Oakland and Los Angeles, and some of the cities that I wanted to include in there just couldn't make it in the end. But maybe there's a volume 2 in the works. Who knows?
Teaser, ultimate teaser. So Hugh asks, what were some major disputed facts that came up in the interviews, specifically situations remembered differently by the interviewees?
Well, one was how the message came out with the Duke Booty and between another member of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Duke Booty remembered that none of the members of the Furious Five wanted to record it, and they had basically left the studio that day and had him record the vocals on his own, the reference track for it. Raheem, who was a member of the Grandmaster Flash, he was like, and I almost hate to say this because Duke Booty passed away, but he was like, unfortunately, his mind is failing him because that's not what happened. And I stayed that day and I did the track, and then I said that Melly Mel should get on here. So it was more of a kind of a coalescing instead of Duke Booty kind of impressing everything that he wanted to do upon the band. And then Sylvia Robinson, who was the owner of Sugar Hill Records at that time, telling them that they had to do it. So that's one thing that immediately sticks out.
Question from Dan. Dan says, great book, Jonathan. I agree with Shea that the book is great in the way it builds the rap house from the outside, but is there any rapper who you wished you could have interviewed but didn't? I'm assuming ones that are all alive still. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can take from that Mount Rushmore of somebody like Jay-Z or Nas, but what Shea said at the beginning, that their records are out there. Like Jay-Z has a book, Nas has a documentary that he produced, and even Rakim has a memoir. I felt like their stories were out there, and I wanted to capture their influence and their impact through the words of other people, which I think that this book does. The thing that I kind of struggled with going in was knowing that I wouldn't be able to get somebody like Jay-Z or Nas. More than likely, should I pull up interviews and use them in the book from like magazine articles or other interviews that they did? And in the end, I said, that I wanted this book just to be original reporting, and I would get who I get, and I'm very proud and happy with who I got. And then I would let the book reflect those words, because if I would have did it the other way, it would have been almost like, where do I stop? Like, do I go back and pull quotes from a magazine article from Tupac or Biggie? It would have just been opening up this big can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
Question from Gwen says, Jonathan, did reporting this book introduce you to new music or subgenres that you ended up loving?
New music or subgenres? You know, I think I was a pretty good listener of hip hop growing up. So I don't know if it introduced me to new subgenres. Like, I'm thinking about back to like Master P and No Limit. And for a while, when I was like 16 or so, you couldn't tell me that Silk the Shocker wasn't the best rapper of all time. And Bun B is somebody who I always respected. Andre 3000, Missy Elliott, somebody who I love to listen to. Now there's so many different subgenres through drill and snap and stuff like that, to where I would have to really listen to it and give it a deep dive to find out if I'm a fan. But I just know that what I've heard of so far, not to sound like that old man saying get off my lawn, but it's not the music that I grew up on.
There was a 2-month period in the late 90s when I was right there with you, like Silk the Shocker, nobody better. Nobody better.
Question here says, how come you didn't spend more time talking about Snow's The Informer? No, I'm just talking. That's not real. That's not real. But I do have one final question before we wrap up, which is, I'm curious to know, you couldn't talk to Nas or Jay-Z, but just for you, not who's the best or who's your favorite, but who do you find to be the most fascinating character in the world of hip hop today? The one that you find the most enigmatic, or that's the least knowable person? And this could be for both. I'd be curious to hear from both of you.
I'm personally gonna say Kendrick Lamar, right?
Because that's what I was gonna say. He just fucking disappeared for 5 years. It was like did nothing, with nobody, just gone.
It's really interesting today, because like artists today, they don't need to do interviews, right? They have this whole ecosystem where they can get their music out directly to their fans, and they don't need the traditional media. So somebody like Kendrick, Drake, they don't need to do interviews with any, like, I don't care where you're from, Rolling Stone, New York Times, like they can bypass all that.
He has that line, Drake has that line, I think I'm famous enough, I don't need any more press. And it's like, that's exactly 100% right. Because he can, when Kendrick Lamar put out the Brow album, he just like tweeted it. He was like, here it is. Tweeted it, and it was out in the world, and that's all that it took. And then everybody was listening to it and talking about it, and he didn't need anything. It's really interesting to watch it happen. When I was in Houston with the Houston Press, interviewing all of the like underground Houston rappers, there was one guy in particular that's got him Les, L-E $ is how he spells it, and he was the first guy that I saw who, of the like new class, who really sort of understood the way that the internet worked. And he just cultivated a smallish fan base. I say smallish, I'm saying like 40,000 people. And that's all. And he just pumps tapes to them like 6 times a year. Here's a new tape, here's a new tape, here's a new tape, here's a sweater, here's a sweater, here's a sweater, whatever. And lives this perfectly comfortable life without having to worry about all of the other shit. It's so crazy to watch. But yes, I'm with you, Jonathan. Kendrick Lamar would be a fascinating person.
Back in the day, there'd be just months and months and months of buildup and anticipation for a new album, and billboards, and just the lead up would be crazy.
I remember when Lil' Kim put out Crush on You with Lil C's, and everyone was like, hey, guess what? I'm in love with Lil' Kim now. It was like this whole thing. Remember this one? She had the different color wigs in the video and going. And then the album came out, and that song was on there, but she doesn't have a verse on it. And it was like, so confused. You were like, what the fuck happened? Why is she not on her own album? What is going on? It was a great time, man. It was so much fun.
Just a reminder, if you guys have not yet got a copy of The Come Up, I hope you will do so. There's a link here. We just posted it again in the chat. And if you're enjoying this conversation, you're going to be blown away by this book. You're going to get to be a fly on the wall in all these amazing discussions that happen throughout it. One final question, and we'll wrap it up. This is from Diane, who says, Jonathan, was it hard for you to keep your interest in hip hop while your mom disapproved of it?
I think I think hip hop is that whole journey, right, where it's gonna find you and it's not gonna let you go, to where you're gonna find a way to listen to it growing up, no matter what. And you know, just one door closes, another door opens. So I still found my way to listen to hip hop growing up.
Good. Well, I want to say a big thank you to Shea and especially to Jonathan, and congratulations on this wonderful book. I hope all of you will read it, tell your friends about it, pass it on, get a copy. We're doing a special tonight, which is 2 for the price of 2. So get one for your friends and your family as well. So thank you all for joining us, gentlemen. This was a pleasure. I appreciate your time, and good night, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Way to go, Jonathan.
Thank y'all.
Bye-bye.